Looking for a guaranteed way to create content that resonates with your audience? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients and let them choose the topic of the interview. Because if your ideal clients care about the topic, there's a good chance the rest of your audience will care about it too. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm Jonathan Green.
And I'm James Carberry.
Let's get into the show. Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. Today we are joined by Vijay Kasireddy. Vijay is the co-founder and CEO at Fiind. Vijay, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jonathan, for having me. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. I'll be the first to admit we ran into some technical difficulties on my end last time that we were scheduled to have you on the show. And Vijay, he was so marvelous about being flexible and allowing me to reschedule the interview so that we could work out all those technical audio glitches. So Vijay, again, thank you so much. It really is going to be great to interview on the show. We're going to be talking today. I love today's topic. We're going to be talking about how the modern marketer has become a data doctor, which I think is a very compelling topic. But of course, before we get into today's topic, maybe you can tell us a little about what you and the Fiind team are up to these days.
Yeah, absolutely, Jonathan. So in fact, someone recently reached out to me with a message that ran something like this. Hey, congrats on your growth. Looks like you're looking for people, hiring for people. We got this unique solution that you want to try. And I was like, who wouldn't like some help, especially when you need it, and it's free to try out. So this person who reached out to me, she noticed that we're hiring, we're expanding, we're launching, et cetera, and that these activities, which we call them signals, indicate a need and reached out to me at the right time, and it worked. So imagine you can understand your potential customer needs, figure out who needs help, and reach out to them with a message that addresses their needs. Better conversions and more customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why Fiind is building a signal store using artificial intelligence to help marketing and sales teams find their customers, whether it's new, upsell, or cross-sell opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Well, and certainly, and so, finding the right customers at the right time, and approaching with the right message, who couldn't use a little bit more of that in their business? So obviously you and the Fiind team are doing some fantastic things. And I think that helps to lay a little bit of groundwork, about today's topic. What we're going to be talking about, how the modern marketer has actually become a data doctor. So, Vijay, tell me a little about this metaphor, about this analogy. What are we kind of talking about today?
Yeah, absolutely, Jonathan. So, if you all think about it, right, a doctor diagnoses first and then prescribes medicine next. So if I have cold, the doctor learns about my symptoms, such as, what's my temperature, what's my blood pressure, do I have pain somewhere, et cetera, before matching the right medicine or right treatment with my symptoms. So if you think about it, a marketer is really no different. Learns about the customer needs and matches with the right solution and a message. The better the needs are understood, the more effective the message is, leading to improved conversions. So all of this from a conceptual standpoint is not really new. But what is new is that a lot of the data that wasn't available previously is available now, which means that marketers can now access and act on the millions of, this customer signal data. One of the questions that I often get, Jonathan, is, what do you mean by signal? So signals are activities from people that indicate their potential needs and buying intent. So examples could be putting out an RFP out there, hiring for people, modernizing systems or processes, risk of cybersecurity, which a lot of people have been talking about it recently. And there can be millions of signals depending on product, service, industry, etc. So this signal data can be used to determine the right customer profile that informs us who's likely to buy your products and services, and more importantly, why. So in many ways, modern marketers are becoming part data doctors.
Yeah, I think I've said it on the show before, is that, we have this sort of unbelievable access to data points. It's just, there's so much data to be had and to use, and it can be overwhelming. And it's this idea of, okay, what data is most important? What do you track? How do you use it? And it has become this incredibly complicated sort of landscape to navigate. And so I almost feel like the doctor analogy is even more appropriate, because, when you think, doctors go through all this schooling and how much, they have to keep track of, and the education and everything that goes into it. It's such an incredibly important and complicated job and process. And so for modern marketers, obviously this is an analogy, but it is, it is more complicated than it ever has been before. So it requires an additional level of thought, of finesse. So, again, another reason why we're excited to have you on the show and talk about this. Now, we do have a few key takeaways as we're talking about how that data holds the keys to understanding the customers and their needs. So, Vijay, let's talk about then, in your estimation, what is the core function of marketing?
Yeah. So if I think about it, I have never seen a marketer get into trouble for successfully creating a lot of customer interest and investment. And those who do it again and again sort of become irreplaceable in their organizations. So I think about the essential function of marketing is to really create customers from interest to investment again and again. And all the activities that we think about, be it creating content, campaign creation, building communities, or brand development, digital transformation. So all of this really support those outcomes of the essential function of marketing, creating customers from interest to investment.
And when you say investment, because maybe the lines have been blurred a bit between sales and marketing these days, especially if you're into ABM and you align your teams. When you talk about investment on the marketing side, I mean, are you talking about a financial investment, an emotional investment, or just a personal investment that now we can start talking about an actual sale?
Yeah, so there are two parts to it. So there is both the emotional investment, getting the customer emotionally interested in your brand, in your product and service, but also getting the financial investment, getting the customer to sign the check. But of course, sales would come into play in there, and the role of a marketer would become sales enablement. Once the engagement with the sales teams actually starts. So be it the ABM, be it providing an effective content and continuing that path from the interest, where there is a lot more involvement from a marketing standpoint. But as you go through the final step of getting the customer to actually getting to write the check or invest, so there is obviously a lot of opportunity for marketer to help the sales as well as the customer to actually buy in.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Okay, so another takeaway that we're going to be touching on is this idea that, understanding the customer. So we've touched on it a little bit in terms of we've got all of this data, but what does it really take to then understand your customer? Yeah.
So to create the customer interest and investment and keep them and, of course, satisfy them, you would want to understand who your customers are, both new and existing. Not only who they are, but what their needs are, why did they invest, all of those questions that are important to be able to target the right customers. So this requires a customer 360 data. So if you were to think of the customer data as a brain, it would have two parts, the left brain and the right brain, so to speak. So one part is typically distributed across all your internal systems, such as ERP, CRM, marketing, etc., where the data tends to be mostly structured and is like the left brain. And another part of the data lives externally, where it's mostly unstructured and it's like the right brain. We want both the left and the right brains come together for a true 360-degree view to best understand your customer needs and intent. So let me give an example. When the marketing team looked at the internal data of a media company, all of the customer attributes looked so similar that the team struggled to come up with a meaningful set of segments to invest in. And so that's when, so to speak, we brought the right brain in and added external data, external signals, such as how mature their digital marketing is, whether the potential customers are SEO optimized, how modern their marketing technology stack is, etc. A clearer picture emerged, and what we noticed is that companies that were digitally mature and technology savvy in certain industries represented the largest opportunities, and as a result of which, the opportunities went up by tenfold. And so the question to ask really for marketers is, do you have access to all the data, internal and the external, the left and the right brains, to be able to understand the customer needs and to plan effectively?
Wow, this is great. We're not only asking our listeners to become data doctors. We're asking them to become data brain surgeons. I feel like at this point, this is the next level we're talking about here. But it makes a lot of sense. And so you're understanding the customer. And you have then several different dimensions to the data. Let's talk about that.
So just like a doctor, how he or she would use all the tools to be able to get the list of all the symptoms and all the data about the patients. So similar to that, once you have access to all the data, you have a customer 360 view, then you want to be able to diagnose and you want to be able to answer questions such as who's likely to buy and why, and when and how should I reach out to them. And the answers to those questions really lie in three dimensions. So there is what we call the fit, we call the intent, and the timing. So if you think about the fit, it's really about similar customers, similar successful customers from the historical data based on the internal data such as the firmographics and demographics, etc. The intent is about the readiness to buy. So this is based on all the external data, such as certain actions, such as leadership change or hiring or changes in technology and so on and so forth. And finally, the timing gives us an idea on whether the customer is looking to make a decision this week or this month or this quarter. And really, the interplay between these three dimensions can help prioritize your marketing investments. For example, accounts that have high fit and high intent, probably you want to invest majority of your budgets for multi-touch campaigns, from call downs to social campaigns to email, what have you. And then one of the interesting things about this is once you have the customer 360 view, once you have all these dimensions, any opportunity that you have in the pipeline or somebody visiting your website, you could also flow them through this engine and rank them real time for better prioritization.
Vijay, and obviously you said that all three of these dimensions, there's overlap and interplay. Of course there is. It sounds a little bit like the intent though is incredibly linked to the timing. In terms of the intent, you said that there's certain markers, if there's growth or leadership change or whatever it is. I mean, is that a one-to-one sort of correlation with the timing, or there is still definitely some nuance there between the two?
Yeah, there is certainly a lot of nuance, actually. So there is the timing sometimes can be very direct. So when you see an RFP out there, so clearly people have certain timelines and milestones, where there are a lot of other signals where the timing is not very clear, or it may be a subtle indication of timing. And so that's where the ability to really bring in multiple data and triangulate the different data to be able to arrive at the timing is actually an important skill to have as well. And so that's where the diagnosis becomes important. And the more data that you have, the easier it becomes to be able to call out the timing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And speaking of, gathering more and more data, this fourth takeaway is about continuous improvement. Tell us a little about what you mean by continuous improvement and what that means for your company.
So there's a famous legend about the origin of chess. That's my favorite story that goes something like this. And I think many of your listeners might have heard about this. When the inventor of the game showed it to the emperor was so impressed by it that he asked the man to name a reward. The man apparently said, give me 1 grain of rice for the first square of the chessboard, 2 grains for the next square, 4 for the next, 8 for next, and so on for all 64 squares, with each square obviously having double the number of grains as the square before. The emperor agreed, amazed that the man had asked for such a small reward, or so he thought. After a week, the treasurer came back and informed that the reward would add up to an astronomical sum, far greater than all the rice in the entire kingdom. And so if you were to apply the same analogy to business or marketing, if the conversions improve 6% every month, month after month, they would double in a year. So the idea is to have a continuous learning system in place that takes the feedback and constantly improving the data and the models to be able to go back and improve the conversions in this particular case. So such a system would act like compounding. And I want to give one example. So a technology company that we're working with was looking at some of the signals such as OPEX versus CAPEX, which is important to determine if a company is looking to cloud solutions versus on-premise. Things like modern workplace, hiring for IoT products, et cetera, et cetera. There were lots and lots of signals. So this company was able to increase their lead to opportunity conversions by over 3x, by 3 times in just 3 cycles by having such a continuous learning system in place where after every wave you would learn about not just what is working well, but what is also not working well. And how do you tweak the model? What are some of the other signals that you would need to get to be able to improve the conversions?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Vijay, I studied economics in undergrad, and I sort of remember that chess story. It always tickles me, and it's a great example. It's a very powerful example to show the power of compound interest, and that is some people think about that, of course, when you're talking about financial planning, but of course it can apply to something even within your own business. So I think that's a great example. Vijay, if for the people listening right now, what would maybe be a suggestion you have, some maybe next best steps if they themselves are looking to sort of become more proficient data doctors themselves when it comes to marketing? Do you have a couple of things that they can take back to their company and start thinking about or implementing today after this episode?
Yeah, absolutely, Jonathan. So the benefits of continuous learning is, over time looks magical, but real. So a couple of questions that we ask ourselves internally as we are using our own tools and as we are trying to grow just like any other business, and some of the questions that we ask our customers as well. There are really 3 that are important. The first one is, do you have a continuous learning engine in place? So the optimization, whether it's the marketing optimization, whether you're running a campaign, or whatever activity that you're trying to perform, is always on and not a one-time thing. And if you have to achieve the benefits of the continuous learning engine, then the second question is, are you leveraging all the data and the tools? Do you have access to all the data, and do you have the right tools to be able to make sense out of it and ask the types of the questions that you're trying to ask? And then finally, one of the pain points that we commonly encounter as people are looking to deploy a continuous learning engine and leveraging the data and the tools is the data quality. And so that's sometimes overlooked. And sometimes what happens is when you have a lot of data and that doesn't look good, it tends to discourage people. So I think it's important to have the right quality systems in place to make sure that all the data that you're looking at is actually highly accurate and makes sense for you to apply all the tools that you have and to feed into the continuous learning engine in place.
Perfect. Well, Vijay, I think these were some tremendous takeaways, some great first steps for our listeners. I always love being able to leave them with some sort of actionable piece of advice at the end of the episode. So you knocked it out of the park with that. Vijay, if any of our listeners are interested in following up with you, they want to find out more about today's topic, they want to find out more about you and Fiind, what's the best way for them to go about doing that?
Yeah, so we can be reached at www.fiind.com. That's 2 I's, Fiind. There's a lot more resources and tools and a lot of content out there that you can check out. And I'd welcome any questions, any queries. I can be reached at vijay@fiind.com, vijay@fiind.com. And Jonathan, it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you so much, Vijay. It was a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, and thanks to all the listeners.
If you've been getting value from this podcast, you can help us reach more people by reviewing the show on iTunes. Here's how you can leave a review in less than a minute. Open your podcast app and tap the search icon in the bottom right corner. Type in B2B Growth, then select our show. Once you're there, tap the Reviews tab and tell us what you think of the show. These reviews help us out a ton.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.